Right, so we were getting excited yesterday about this concept of Atik and Binah. Who could tell me why, just throw out a little quiz question to start things up, who could tell me why Atik dwells only in Binah and not in chochma? Davido.
Yeah. Are we still talking about Avraham?
Yeah.
Chochma is not a thing on itself, and it cannot express itself. Binah can.
No,
Okay. Binah, we said Atik is like the level of pleasure, the divine pleasure. They have will and pleasures, Arich and Atik. Yes? Is anyone following me?
Yeah.
Arich and Atik. That's the will and the pleasure. The pleasure is the level of Atik, like sort of pure divinity, and it can't express itself in chochma because chochma, as Shaul just said, it doesn't have really any expression. The idea of pleasure has to have a sort of what we call hispashus, an expansion, in order for it to be pleasurable. And since chochma is like a bittul, it's a non-expression. So therefore, Atik dwells specifically in Binah more than it dwells in chochma. And the idea is that Avram took a hey to his name. This is really not just a hey; it's a level of going up into the Atik, and the hey represents the expression of Atik in the lower world, which is basically bringing forth the chochma as it is in a full expansion of what it really is, as opposed to just a ray of chochma, which is like the normal bina. This is sort of the juiced up bina, which is able to, you're able to go down and bring up the same level of godliness down below, only because you went higher to a higher source. So when you see the name Avraham, why suddenly does he get a hey in his name when he brings this like bris and therefore unleashes a new level of godliness in the world? Because really the hey contains the Atik, and it comes out and expressed in an expressed form as the hey.
when you started off, you said the pleasure can't exist in the expansive.
In the chochma, no, it only exists in the expansive. In other words, pleasure is like sort of a feeling of expansion. Chochma, on the other hand, is a feeling of bittul. In other words, that chochma contains everything in a point, which means that the things are not in a state of expression; they're in a state of nullity. So no, I'm talking about chochma. Chochma is a point, right? Binah is the expansion of a point.
Oh, that's right.
Why is pleasure expansion? Because you're getting.
I guess
get
it's
information you realize that you have to get pleasure, and then you just lose the bittul.
Yeah, it's connected a little bit with self, right? Pleasure.
Why is that expansion?
It's like it's an expansion of your own. When you're in a state of like sort of letting yourself be and sort of get into yourself, let's put it like that, as opposed to sort of.
That's expansion?
That's expansion. Your powers are sort of you're letting yourself sort of express yourself and extend your sort of sensors. I don't know. The idea of chochma is that everything has to lose any notion of self. The idea of pleasure is that you're getting into your experience of self, right? You're not. You see how like pleasure and bittul don't actually necessarily go together. Because bittul is there's no feeling person. You're a non-entity, right? So pleasure, the divine pleasure, which is like an infinite, God's infinite pleasure of Himself, basically, it can't reside in the sphere of chochma, which is a non-entity, an unexpressed entity. It comes out in Binah.
How does Binah have to do with expression if it's also tied to before, which is like attraction?
Because that's a good question. Because take speech for example. Okay, speech is a contraction on thought, right? But at the same time that you're contracting the thought, you're letting it come out of you. In other words, it has both qualities. On one hand, it's the whole idea is that the way that chochma is cannot be experienced in the normal model. The way that chochma is cannot be experienced in an expressed way. That's what we're saying. It's like everything in a state of bittul. You can't really see that. You follow me? Because everything is there. If the things that were there had like extension to their bodies, so it'd be everything at once, and it would sort of be a nothing, right? So the whole idea is that you have the entire infinity in one point. It's because the infinity is not in an expanded state. If you want to get it to an extended state, you have to contract that infinity and let out a like thought to speech, right? You have to contract the thought because you can't see the thought as it is. If you want to see the thought, you have to put it into physical letters and sort of say each letter one at a time and like slowly invest your ideas into sort of clumsy words, right? So it's an expansion, but the expansion itself comes at a price that you have to contract the thing that you're trying to see because you can't see it in its pristine form. You can only see it in a contracted form. So Binah is expansion because it contracts the higher light. That's the normal order. What we're saying now is sort of like a neat trick. We're saying that we're going to take that properties of Binah's expansion, but instead of the normal way that it winds up expanding something, which is by contracting the area from which it's coming, the chochma or the thought in this case, it doesn't have to contract it, right? Because it's going to be able to pass over the exact same qualities of chochma. In other words, it's a miracle that this thought, which cannot be expanded, which cannot come out in its present form, finds a way to come out in its present form.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Like unzip drive.
Yeah, something like that. Okay. So, we're still involved in this. To understand it further, we said, let's look at the mashalim of Shlomo HaMelech, who said, as we said yesterday, 3,000 mashalim for every idea.
We did two.
We tried to do two,
Yeah, that was awesome.
unsuccessfully.
Wow.
All right. So he says, Va'inyanhu, he says, I think we did a little bit in here, but yeah, we did. No. Okay, we did a little bit, but let's just say this little sentence again. He says, "Va'inyanhu kamosha anu roim." This is as we see, sha'achacham, av sheyodei davar chochma ba'atzmo. A chacham, even though he knows the thing, the piece of wisdom himself, af al pi chein einu yachol lasbir ha'chochma hahi lozulaso. He's not able to explain it to another person. Ad shekodem shu masbir, until before he'll explain it to the other person, tzrich lekasher daito b'chozek. He has to connect his mind strongly to himself, lisyashiv eichu ma sheyachol lasbir, and to think deeply and to settle himself inside what and how he's going to explain this, lishtalsha lamata, and bring it down b'devarim tachtonim, into lower entities, bisham b'mashal, and to invest his idea into a mashal, right? If he tries to say his wisdom, we said yesterday, as is, it's going to go, like we talked about Avram Avinu, it's going to go over the heads of everyone. No one's going to understand what he's trying to tell them. If he just says the chochma as it is. So he'll have to come up with some kind of a very fancy mashal, some kind of special letters in order to bring the idea that he has, but put it into the vessel of the people around him. How does he do that? Not by going down, but by going up. He goes like very deep into his own chochma and finds like sort of the source of his chochma, and therefore, now that he's become like super wise, he can find just the right words to come down with. Right? That's the idea of what we're saying. Yet, that the source of Binah is really in Atik.
Right.
Did you get that, Levi?
Nope.
Okay, let's do it one more time.
Is it that all the time though?
When we're talking about, no, it's not all the time. There's
Just at that
I want to just go back to what Baruch was saying about, is Binah a contraction and it's lower than chochma?
Yeah.
Or is Binah from Atik and it's higher than chochma? There are two different ways that Binah can be. We were talking before about derech hislavshus and derech mavar. Same idea. In other words, the normal way for Binah to work is that it contracts chochma and doesn't capture it really.
It's not true.
Right? And that's the idea that Avram's going to come along and he's got all this chochma and he wants to express himself to the people around him. But he doesn't do any kind of special work to express his chochma. He just talks. And just like going from thought to speech, he's going to let it out. Well, by definition, when you go down a level, you lose something dramatically. Right? Because that thing which is called thought, you can't, when you try to bring it down a level, you can't express the thought as it is. That's why it has to come down through different vessels, through speech vessels. And basically, what happens is not just goes from thought to speech, but it loses even the meaning of the idea that you're trying to say. Right? Because the person who you're trying to speak to is not on your level to understand. The second you're trying to give it over to them, they don't have the vessels to perceive it. You say it out and they lose it, basically. They think you're saying something else to them. That's the regular sort of problem of the Seder Ishtalshlus in general. Every time you go down, you contract the higher light, and if you don't make special arrangements, that light will just remain above, and you give some external chitzonius hashpa below, which means they don't really get what you're saying, and there's a miss. What we're talking about with Avraham was a new level of hashpa, that you can in fact translate higher godly concepts to lower vessels. You can put the very same ideas that the Rebbe has in his head, he could put it into a child's head. How does he do that? So not just by starting to talk and explaining himself. He has to go very, very deep inside of himself to a higher level than chochma in order to find the right mashal, right? The perfect set of words. The perfect set of words. Levi, you listening?
Yep.
He has to find the perfect set of words to find just the right mashal, which is going to be, what is a mashal? It's basically something which is not the idea. The mashal is not the idea that he has in his mind. The mashal is a mashal. It's like, let's talk about the mashal. We'll talk about a rock, right? And striking a rock with another rock, you can get fire to come out. That's not a deep idea. That's a mashal of a physical event, right? But I'm going to use that mashal, the physical event, I'm going to pick just the right mashal. I'm going to find the exact thing in this physical world that will enclose this deep idea that I have, but speak about it in a language which is fit for children, so that the child can not only stand hear the words that I'm saying, he can even grasp the idea that I'm saying, because I've been able to enclose the fullness of the idea into lower vessels, i.e. a mashal. And that does not happen automatically when chochma wants to express itself. The automatic expression of chochma is that you lose the essential idea and you give over some external thing. But like sort of the supercharged level, if chochma will go up first and sort of be imbued with the level of Atik, then when it comes down, it's able to carry itself down without losing its real meaning, and nonetheless go down into lower areas by finding the right mashal to express itself into. You understand that? So that's what we're saying, basically, that the okay, that's good. So in order to explain it, you have to go deep into yourself first in order to come out with the right mashal. And this is the whole process of going up to Atik, and therefore enabling yourself to come down to Binah in the real higher level of Binah. That Binah becomes a vehicle for godliness, just like chochma is.
Wow.
As opposed to a contraction and a concealment of chochma, which is what the normal state would be.
Also, a person gets chochma, and the only way of really giving it over or doing something with it, so making it to Binah, and by making it a proper Binah, you have to go to Atik to bring it down. It's crazy.
And he's saying this is the simple mashal. If you want to if you have if a little child walked into this class right now, 5-year-old, okay, and everyone has to go and explain this mimer to them, and here we can't even understand it hardly ourselves. But your assignment right now is to explain this to a 5-year-old child. Hey, you have artists, right? This is the whole business of art. You have to figure out a whole symbolic way. Basically, it's very, very difficult. You have to go figure out something some way to transfer this information to a 5-year-old's mind. You certainly can't start explaining it to him the way we are. He's not going to know what the language, nothing. So you have to find some kind of a movie or a picture or like a piece of artwork that's going to sort of capture that idea. That's much, much, much more difficult. You can't just do that. You have to sit there and think and plan and go into the back room and sort of come up with it on the drawing board. You have to go deeper into yourself in order to go down below if you want to capture the real idea. So he says, okay, going on. Okay, and lalbisham b'mashal, and to put them into a mashal. Dahainu, which means to say, here, this is new. We didn't do this yesterday. The line starts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down. Page 22. Dahainu. Which means exactly as we just said, you're able to find that very same chochma, gam b'dvarim tachtonim. You're going to find it in rocks, plants, movies. In other words, you're going to find the same piece of wisdom in a lower dimension of life, not really in the dimension of intellect anymore. You're going to find it in a physical object that you're going to explain that it's there as well. A mashal. This is not just a regular chacham, because the regular chacham, he does understand it himself. He just can't explain it to another person without losing it. But a chacham gadol, a great chacham, he's able to even explain it for this reason. Because he's able to invest his wisdom even into lower forms of life, as it were. What does it mean, lower forms of life? Like examples of a rock hitting another rock, or a ray coming out of the sun, or talk about plants and how you put a seed in the ground, or a child grows in the mother's womb. All these things are physical things, but they can contain very, very deep ideas, and you have to find just the right mashal to bring forth your idea so the person knows what's happening.
Tactonium is underwear, no?
In this case, it is not underwear.
It's something, right?
Under, yeah, the lower world.
He also has a very select vocabulary.
Okay, got that out of the way. Rak Shlomo HaMelech. Oh, so this is what's interesting, right? It says in the end of Sota, Mishameis Rebbe Meir Batlu HaMashalim HaMoshlim. So it says when Rebbe Meir died, Alav Shalom, the Chaver of Rebbe Yehuda and Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai, etc. It says there was no more Moshlim. There's no more people that could give a mashal. No one else could do this. And this is not a simple thing to do. To find a mashal which literally contains the entirety of the idea that you have in your mind, right? A perfect mashal. It ceased to be amongst Israel. He was able to do, how many mashalim was he able to give for everything? 3. No, Rebbe Meir. So you could say, right? So he was able to find 3 mashalim for everything, and after him, no one could find any more mashalim. Shlomo HaMelech found 3,000 for every single idea that he had. He was able to dress it up in a completely new dimension with a different idea, and then further down and further down and further down and further down, he was able to bring the essential chochma out, right, and express it so it should be seen. What's that?
3,000
levels
of
right. So where does the idea of 3,000 come from, by the way, and 3 for that matter? It's a little bit of a connection there, because basically what we're trying to say is what is chochma in general? What world does chochma represent?
The world?
What world
Third world.
is the sphere of chochma represent?
Atzilus?
What did he say? Atzilus. Why is it
Because
Atzilus?
it's like not different. It's not really yesh, completely.
Because the 10 spheros correspond to the 4 worlds, right? Don't they?
Yeah.
Chochma's Atzilus. What's Binah?
also.
Huh?
Also.
Bria.
Bria. Right? The 10 spheros, you can find the 4 worlds in the 10 spheros. So Chochma is Atzilus, Binah is Bria. What's Yetzira?
Das.
Chesed.
Das.
The 7 midos.
Well, the 6
The
midos.
6 midos.
Right?
And then Malchus is down.
And Malchus is
Asiya.
Asiya.
Right.
Oh, right.
Yud K Vav K. Right?
Those are all in the last one.
You got to know that. That's like a
Yeah,
key
yeah.
piece of information right there, right? You can't really go anywhere without that like map in your head that the 10 spheros is broken into 4 parts. Those 4 parts represent just about everything. The Yud K Vav K, the 4 worlds, the 4 levels of existence, man, animal,
This is around
man, animal, growing and inanimate. They represent the 4 elements, everything, right? So it's all in the tree of life. It's really 10, which turns into 4. We mustn't forget that.
You should review that eventually.
Well, it's just right there. I mean, it's just a kind of a simple one, no? You have 10, and the only question is, how do I turn 10 into 4? So again, we'll review it right now, because it's very, very important to know this. Why is it important? Because it's like underlying every single conversation we have, basically. The Yud, or the Chochma, is Atzilus, or Yud, right? Yud K Vav K. Binah is Bria, or Hey. Yetzira is the 6 midos, which are called the emotional midos, called the vav. A good way to remember that's the tough one basically, because there's vav is equals 6 in gematria. So the 6 midos, chesed, gevurah, tiferes, netzach, hod, and yesod, that's that area called the vav or yitzira. And then you have malchus, which is asiya, the final hay. So where are we going with this? That everyone, Shlomo was able to give 3,000 mashalim, Rabbi Meir was able to give 3 mashalim. There's a connection there. Because what is a mashal basically? It's the ability to take your chochma and invest it into lower places, right? That's the idea of what a mashal is. That's what we just got through saying. So if the chochma itself is atzilus, right? Because chochma represents atzilus, the whole of atzilus is like the sphere of chochma in general. So then bringing your chochma down, how many levels are there to go down? 3. Right? You want to bring your chochma and translate it so Bria can see the chochma of atzilus, and Yitzira and Asiya. So that's what Rabbi Meir was able to do. He was able to put every davar chochma into 3 mashalim because he was able to bring it down, the necessary stages of basically what's called thought, speech, and action, or whatever, that's another way of putting it on the tree. Thought, speech, and action, and the 10, those are the garments, and the 10 powers of the soul represents Atzilus. For another something from the way of organizing the tree. But anyway, the point is, so what's with Shlomo HaMelech? He had 3,000. How do you explain that?
Because it's 1,000 per.
Right. We know that there's sort of 1,000. What are the?
There's Fira has 10 inside, so 10 times 10, and then like
times 10, basically,
times 10,
right?
10, and then
No, 10 times 10 times 10 is basically
right.
The idea.
Malchus of Asiya.
So he was able to bring, Shlomo Melech was able to bring it not only generally through the 3 worlds and sort of in a general way describe his idea down. Shlomo was able to do it through every single stage of the Seder Yishtalshlus. That's where he comes up with 3,000. And every there's 1,000 sort of parts in each world, and he was able to find the right vessel, the right muscle to bring Atzilus and Chochma down and to enclose it into every single level of the Seder Yishtalshlus.
He did everything.
Yeah. He was called the wisest man that ever lived. And what was his wisdom? Not that he had wisdom, but that he had the ability to express his wisdom. Because that's what it means, a great wise man, not just a regular wise man. So that being said, Shlomo HaMelech alav hashalom, berov binaso, right? Even though he's known for his chochma, it was really berov binaso, because of his great Binah. Hayachol limtzo shlosha shalafim mashal. That's how he was able to find the 3,000 mashalim. And the Binah, where does that come from? It comes from the Atik. So he's going higher and higher and higher and higher in order to go lower and lower and lower and lower. The Hainu Gimel Alafim Madregos Lamata man. It means he went 3,000 levels below him, stage by stage, to bring his wisdom literally down to the level of the lowest level.
So if he wanted to explain Malchus of Asiya, he had to go to like the highest of the highest level.
Right, exactly. If he wanted to explain what Atzilus is to Malchus of Asiya, he would have to go who knows where.
Wow.
Right, the higher, the lower you go, the higher you have to derive from.
Wow.
Gam Sham Hayacholim So, even there in the lowest places, he was able to find Laharos Oso Davar Chochma, and to show that very Davar Chochma Ba'atzma itself, Shayodea. And he was able to bring the very same level of Chochma that he knew. He was able to enclose it in a perfect mashal all the way down the line. In other words, without tainting it, without transforming it. Again, there is a tzimtzum there. It's a different kind of tzimtzum. It's a tzimtzum which preserves the authenticity versus the regular tzimtzum of Binah, which is a tzimtzum which loses the authenticity. And so what happens when you lose the authenticity? It creates klippa, right? When Hashem wants to make a world, He really wanted to make the world so that the world would be a manifestation of Himself. But that didn't happen at first. Instead, he tried to do that, and it came out a dark, crazy place which does anything but show Him, right? Because he had to contract. You understand what I'm saying by that? You know, the idea of going down, at first, if you just go straight down without sort of going up first and bringing the authenticity with you, you create just a concealment. You go from godliness to worldliness. And further worldliness just gets darker and darker and darker, because when you're trying to explain it without sort of having this deep inner ability to enclose the truth inside. It just, the more you speak, the more watered down it gets, and you have no, and then when you're with your end has no resemblance to the beginning. That's like the regular idea of Binah. So therefore, now we're talking about how Hashem fixed that is the Torah. Avram being the beginning of it. The Torah is called, as we said yesterday, it's called the Mashal HaKadmoni. It's called the primordial Mashal, enabling Hashem to come all the way down here without losing a drop of authenticity. And as we learned in yesterday's Tanya, it says that the Gemaras, we had questions over here not long ago, is the oral Torah really as godly and divine as, let's say, the Chumash? So according to this, we can understand that question very clearly. Yes! On the contrary, it's more so. Because to get it to go to the Chumash level, that was one stage of coming down. That's like the Torah of Atzilus. To get it to come down into Bria and Yetzirah and Asiyah and so forth, you need even greater enclosures. So it's godliness mamish, it's godliness in a new mashal, untampered the perfection of the truth, and this is sort of the continuation of our belief as Jews that the oral law was a transmission, albeit from man's mouth, but it was entirely a divine thing because it was brought down to a new world.
And it's brought down from a higher place
because it goes lower.
Because it goes lower, we're talking about seemingly something that's farther from godliness. They're not like wall or earth, but really that's being drawn from a...
Yeah.
What is why it's far from godliness? It's not accessible.
What? Say it again.
What's the difference between being far and being accessible?
Okay.
Is there a difference? It's not far from godliness, is it?
Like in other words, like just the lower worlds, you're saying?
No, I mean this type of wisdom that you can't fully access or express.
In other words, the wisdom before it gets put into the mashal, you're saying? Right. So I guess the idea is that it's not. It is godliness, but you're not able to access it, like you're saying. Yeah, you don't have the right sort of magnifying glass to actually see what's inside. So I guess you could call that far away from you. It's not that it's not there, but yeah, it's unaccessible.
Why did Noah's generation get in trouble so much if Avram wasn't on the scene yet? Like the medicine or whatever.
Right. I hear what you're saying.
What did what?
Why would Noah punish Noah's generation or punish him much if Avram wasn't there?
Again, when we look at it as a punishment, then you have a question. But we said we went through great lengths to say it wasn't a punishment. It was like it was a purification, right?
That's true.
Before the Mabul?
It was a
He was
punishment.
not punished. He was like...
And that's the whole reason why that did happen. The only way to get to a state of Abraham was to completely have the world go through a complete mikveh. What's a mikveh? Transforming your previous state to a new state. It wasn't able. Yeah, it was getting ready for Abraham. It wasn't able to have this happen while this foreskin was on. In a certain sense, like the mikveh is like a big mila to the world, right? So just like it hurts a little bit to cut off the tip, Hashem had to basically cut off the tip of the world a little bit. It says he took 3 tefachim from the earth itself. He gave the earth a little mila there, right?
3 tefachim, so like 3 levels to bring the higher.
Yeah. What's that? By the mabul. All right, so going on. Lechain, k'shenitzrich lishtalshel hamadrega. Therefore, when you have to go down a level, shtiyah hizbonus barchava. And there, you need to have a deeper meditation. So it has to come from a source which is much, much higher. Right? When you're going to start really deepening your Binah, and you're going to start really sort of meditating and understanding things in a great depth, in order for the idea to express itself and expand itself in the proper way, it means you have to go to a higher source. You can't just stay in chochma, because chochma is like a contracted space which really doesn't lend itself to being seen. So from chochma itself, the more you can look at it and look at it all you want, but it's going to stay contracted. You have to go beyond chochma, into chochma, and sort of like, it's almost like an hourglass, that the chochma is the point in the middle where it's like there's nothing there to look at. So if you wanted to come down, you really realize you have to go back up into like the great big ocean that's behind chochma. That chochma sort of contains all that in the point. You need to go back up into the source material the place which chochma gathered from to get all that information, and that's called the keser.
Wow. Like studying like Chumash and then going through like all sources and all types of like references.
Well, he's talking here about Pasha, like a physiological thing,
right.
That when you want to go deeper into a concept, you have to sort of contract yourself and go and sort of and find a higher source. You have to sort of draw from a greater level of wisdom than is readily available to you. It's drawing from the koach hamaskil, I would say. Well, keser, like let's say, is the koach hamaskil, right? The chochma of keser is the koach hamaskil. So you're basically, you're drawing more from that place, so that it should come through chochma and can be seen. But again, it never gets seen in chochma. Chochma is just like a little thin part of the hourglass. It doesn't really show itself. The way when it comes out is in Binah. So you're going up into the koach hamaskil to like sort of trigger it and then stimulate it and make it give more, but where does it show itself? Not in chochma, it just passes through chochma and you see it in Binah. That's the whole point that we're trying to make. The az yechol liyos is galus Binah. Only then, when you go connect yourself to a higher place, can you reveal this Binah. But from the chochma itself, it doesn't automatically come out this great level of Binah, only an external, as we said before, aspect of Binah. Rak shoresh Binah, visgalusa, the root of making a Binah and its revelation, his galus Atik ba, is when you reveal something higher than chochma, when you reveal Atik in it. Va'al yada nishtal shalav nisgal b'harchava, and through Atik, al yada nishtal shalav nisgal b'harchava. Then you can come down and reveal Binah in a very proper, expanded way.
Chava is expanded?
Chava means expanded, yes. So he says, so this is the idea of basic Shlomo HaMelech, that how to get all those mashalim, he went up. V'af kan, so too here, lios ha'aras ha'bina, orech v'rocha, so too here, in order for there to be the shine of Binah to come out with length and width, in other words, to expand the concept, min bechinas yud, from that yud, which is from that point of unexpansion, of chochma, which is a bechinas nekuda, it's just a point, hu ayde gilu bechinas elyona yoser, it's really by revealing a higher level, hu bechinas atik, which as we said is atik, which is bechinas kotzu shel yud, which represents, so to speak, on the pictorial diagram, the crown of the yud. So we've been talking all this time, you have 4 levels that you can break down the 10 spheres into 4 parts. What are they again? Someone a raise of hands? Yeah?
Chochma, Binah, Da'at, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, Asiya. No?
No, Atzilus is chochma, Binah is Bria, and Yitzira is the Zerachim,
right? Right, so we have 4 levels. Now we're throwing on, and what do we say that it is? Yud K Vav K. Right? So now we're saying that the yud itself has a little crown on its head. That's how you make a yud with a crown, right? A little line sticking up. And so that kotzo shel yud, that part sticking up out of the yud, that represents what goes up above chochma. That little line is sort of the line to the infinity, and that represents, of course, keser. So now we sort of have 5 parts, if you will, in our diagram instead of 4. Really, it's yud kei vav kei, which is 4 letters, but there's a crown on the yud which brings you up above the chochma. And you need to go up there in order to really come down to the Binah. That through the crown of the yud, that's what enables the yud to go down into the hay. If the yud didn't have a crown, it was just the yud without the crown, it would still be wisdom, but if you have wisdom which is unable to expand itself and express itself into Binah, it would be stuck in its place. To get the mashalim, to go 3,000 mashalim or 3 mashalim, to start going down to bring Yitzir and Asiya, you require that little crown on top of the yud.
Like 3 little lines in the crown, or not?
Well, I guess there's 2 ways of looking at this, but sometimes you can look at the crown is like literally the extra little lines. You've seen in the Sefer Torah, there's like little, it doesn't always have to be 3, it could be 1, it could be set, it could be different numbers, But here he's talking, so there's the crown of the yud. There's also, in general, the way you make a yud, and that's what he's going to say right now. Let's just read it for a second and you'll see. Kamavur b'pardes. What's the pardes? Who wrote Pardes? The Ramak. Right, you're right though. It's the Pardes represents the Pshat, Remes, Drush, and Sod, but there's a sefer called the Pardes written in Sfas by the Rebbe Moshe Cordovero. So who's buried next to the Arizal, is the Arizal's teacher. So he says it's explained in this book called the Pardes. Shayud Yeshlo Gimel Kotzi. That the Yud in general, without talking about crowns on top as it were, just the way you draw a Yud, it already has 3 little lines in it. 3 little crowns. The Yud itself is made up of 3 crowns. That's what a Yud is. Because if you never see, like a Yud is like this. You draw like down a little bit, then you have this sort of thing right there, and then it has another down part. Right? It has the Yud is made in 3 parts. A real Yud, right?
Wow.
Like this, and like this.
It's cool. Is this what Rabbi Akiva was learning?
The first principle.
No, even more than that, I guess you could say. Like then there's like crowns coming on top of it. So yeah, that's what he was learning. He was learning the crowns of the letters like that. He was learning mountains and mountains of halachas from the crowns of letters. And that's what one way of reading the Kotzo Shel Yud sometimes means that really. But here he's saying on a more specific, like a general level, it's just that the Yud itself is drawn in 3 parts, right? And so what he's saying is that from the Mikotz HaTachton Nimshach HaHei Mikotz HaTachton Yesh Bechinas Kotz HaElyon. So what he says is that from the lower crown coming from the bottom of the Yud, that's where the Hey ultimately comes from, right? If the Yud basically like sort of leads into the, if you're going to draw like a Yud K Vav K one on top of the other, so the bottom of the Yud is the beginning, is going to where the Hey is going to take its place. So he's saying that the actual bottom of the Yud, the lower third of the Yud, is responsible for making a Hey. From that part comes out the Hey. If you want to say in general that the Yud is like a Seder Ishtalshus within the Yud itself, you have 3 parts. Therefore, the lowest part is like the bottom of the Yud. From there, it spits out the ability to go to the Hey, to go to Binah. And what he's saying is that from the lower crown, which is drawn the Hey, and inside Ubekotz HaTachton, inside that lower crown, Yesh Bechinas HaKotz HaElyon. It has in it the level of the higher crown. In other words, the ability for, in other words, the Yud itself is basically what we're saying is a little pictorial diagram of exactly what we just explained about Abraham. That really the Yud is just a fat center part. But if the Yud wants to go down and like sort of finish its letter, it has to really go up in order to finish its letter. So the fact that it's able to go, what comes down is where the Hey comes from, but the only way that you get the Hey is because the higher part of the Yud is inside of the lower part of the Yud. And therefore, chochma itself has intrinsically inside of it this little system going on.
Wow.
What does it mean that the lower part of Yud, the Hey, comes from that?
In other words, it's like Malchus of Atzilus, so Bria comes from that. The lowest part of the higher one is the source of the lower one. It's like the end of the Yud, so therefore now I can come to a Hey. It's the power of the Yud to express itself. So the power of the Yud to express itself really comes from a deep inner power of the Yud, which is actually the part of the Yud which is sticking off the top of its head, like beyond its own self. V'lechein, no. V'nimtza sheyesh ha'aras kotz ha'elyon bebina, and therefore what? It comes out therefore that there's a shine of the higher crown inside of Binah. If the lower crown is what makes Binah, but the lower crown can only make Binah if the higher crown is found inside that lower crown, that means that when it finally makes Binah, an aspect of the higher crown of the Yud is inside of Binah. Did you follow that?
I didn't.
If the only way to make a Hey is through the lower crown, and the higher crown is found in the lower crown, then when the Binah finally comes out, the Binah contains it in an aspect of the higher crown. Because the only way it was able to get there is by drawing on this higher crown. So it actually goes, the crown on top of the Yud actually is inside of Binah. It's what made Binah be able to be there in the first place. So Binah, as we've been saying this whole time, expresses the Atik, expresses the Keser. You can actually see it. V'lechein yerida zu Hi b'chinas Eloi ma'od. Therefore, this, so to speak, descent is actually a huge ascent. Shenimshach or hakeser, because it draws down the light of keser, which could not be drawn down if you merely had chochma.
Don't they call getting married a Yerida?
Yeah, for this reason, it's the same thing. The woman is the Binah. Right? That's why you can't be a king unless you're married. You can't be a Kohen Gadol unless you're married. Greatness comes to the man through his wife. Because why? Because by busy going down and sort of getting involved in the world and being like a responsible person, that requires a much deeper level of inner, perspective and basically going higher. And the way it expresses itself is by going lower. So yeah, I mean the whole idea of marriage is mamash. That's what this is. It's really, this is everything. You're going to find that this is in every system.
You mentioned that like the oral Torah is technically higher than the Chumash.
For what we're saying now, yeah, because the oral Torah represents Binah, the Chumash represents chochma.
Can't you say that the lower something comes, the higher it is, and you could look at like what's going on with the Muslims as like a higher level? They're so far removed from the Chumash. It's like
No. So you're talking about klippa. Now we already made a distinction. There's two ways that chochma can express itself. It expresses itself in a way where its message is clear, or it can express itself in a way where its message is unclear because it did not find the right muscle to put itself into. It just sort of threw up on everybody. Right? That's what Muslims are. They're like throw up on everybody. Right? And because basically they don't contain the wisdom. It like leaks out. It does not have the full authority and authenticity of the Torah. And therefore it's a bastardization of the Torah, just like everything else in the world. Right? It's not the only place that godliness truly showed himself in a settled way is inside of the Torah. That's what the Torah is, God. It's connected with God. So everything else is klippa. So you could argue, we could have another class and another conversation and argue that even klippa has a very high source, and we do that other times. But right now we're talking about Avram Avinu, which
hidden.
Right, it's hidden. Here it's not hidden. Here the beauty of it is Hashem can reveal it too if He wants. He can bring it all the way down there and reveal it. And in fact, that's what the Torah allows us to do. Like we said, Avram became the father of many nations. Once we have the Torah, we can go around lighting all them up by making them part of the Torah, making them be obedient to the 7 Noahide laws, making them recognize that Eretz Yisrael belongs to the Jews because the Torah says so. Once they recognize that, they're part of the Torah. Any goy who raises his hand and says, yes, the Jewish people should live in their Jewish land, he's part of the Torah all of a sudden. He's fixed. He's become part of the story of God. Anyone who's not saying that is broken. He's outside of the lines of God's wisdom coming down to this world. We got to fix it.
It's in the teva.
It all has to do with how we talk. We say crazy things to the world. Anyway, so Lechain Yerida Zuhi, it's really an aliyah. Lechain. So this is just. I think it feels like we're out of time, but let's see. Yeah. So let's just finish this line. This is a beautiful thing. This line. This line says it all. And why is it so beautiful? Because Levi, it's beautiful. Levi, beautiful. Come around. So it says like this. Why is it so beautiful? Because everything we discussed is like sort of this very expanded philosophical concept. You're going to see that it's mamish sitting inside the Chumash. Just like we said, Lech Lecha from Avram. It's like right there. It's so beautiful. It has a certain like geschmack to it. So this also, this notion of going down or just really going up, is sitting in the Torah in front of you. It says V'yelech l'masav mineged. So regarding Avram, it says he went to his journeys southernly, right? And what is southernly? South represents chesed, first of all. Why does south represent chesed? Nice. All right. Some things are settling in here. Because the Beis Hamikdash, Baruch Hashem, it says the Shekhinah is in the west, as it were. When you walk into the Beis Hamikdash, it's like you're facing Hashem, right? So the back of Hashem, if you're facing Him, it would be east. And the face of Hashem, the west, west. And Hashem's facing you is east. And therefore that means his right hand would be on the south and his left hand would be on the north. So we have these sort of like directions connected with midos intrinsically in the Torah. So when it says someone is going south, Avram was going south all the time, haloch v'nitzoah hanegba, he was going southerly. It means he's going towards chesed. What is chesed? Chesed is basically revelation. It's the idea of coming out and revealing himself. Like we said by Binah, it's like he's sitting at the gate of the tent. So even from Binah, it's even a further expression. In other words, Binah itself is going down. Chesed is then going even further and continuing the ride all the way down. So he's going south, 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 south. Means he's basically going down, revealing in this manner of Chesed all the way down. Ad base kale, until he got to where? Base kale, which is called Malchus. Base kale is basically the house of God. It's sort of the kli in which all the lights disseminate into. So the house in general can be connected with Malchus for that reason. And then that's called Milamai Lamata. That's called from above to below. So we said from above to below. So Avram was clearly traveling down. But in order to travel down in this particular beautiful way, how do you travel down? By traveling up. Right? Because if you're going to go down and take the authenticity with you, it's because you traveled up. So we see also that he went Milamata Lamaila. Where do we see that? Because when he offered his sacrifices, the first one he says, I'm going to offer a sacrifice La Hashem Hanire. He says, to Hashem who appeared to me. Which is basically, if Hashem is appearing, that's a certain level of, a lower level of godliness that can be seen, Bichlal, that comes to revelation. Wow. And next it says he offered to offering La Hashem, just period to Hashem, not the appeared, the revealed Hashem, but to a sort of unseen, higher level of Hashem, which cannot even come into revelation. So as he's busy going down, his sacrifices he's offering are to higher and higher levels of divinity, and that's why he's able to go down. Because he's like connecting himself much higher, and therefore he can bring the godliness all the way down to Malchus, to base scale. So this is basically what it means. Lech Lecha, therefore, as the mimer begins with a little parentheses, he says we have to understand Lech Lecha means both from below to above and above to below. And why? Because you can't go from above to below unless you start by going from below to above and reach higher and higher. And it's like basically this like sort of rubber band situation. The higher you go, the lower you go. And that's what it means, Lech Lecha. I thought that was pretty cool. Okay. Behold here.